Hey there, friends, it's Nick, and this is episode 461 of the Story Hacker podcast. So, I was having a weird sort of chat, a weird chat with a mate of mine, Phil, last week, and he's one of my listeners who occasionally dips into the podcast and goes, "Oh, that's it." And he's one of several people recently who have talked about the discipline of, the discipline I must have is the inference to get something out every day. And I wanted to clarify something, I guess, because I think you do need discipline to start things. And sometimes sometimes you definitely need it to finish things. But I think there comes a point where, if you think about it the right way, discipline becomes identity. So Seth Godin's quite good on this, actually, talking about, he's got a phrase that he uses a lot. So, people like us do things like this. And I think there's been a point over the last 12, 13 months where I've realised that however many people are listening, I'm a person who sits down every day to talk about something and think about something and articulate an idea, as much for my benefit as for anyone else's, to be honest. But I guess it's become part of my identity. It's become part of my story. I am the kind of person who does this. Now, there's plenty of things in my life where I've tried to get to that state, and it hasn't stuck. I've tried to lose weight 1,000 million times. I've tried to, do more exercise. There are plenty of things where I've tried to become something, tried to change in a long-term way, and some of them have worked, some of them haven't. I mean, there was definitely a point in my 20s where I realised the value of work, like actual work, not just work to get away with it. Not just the minimum I need to fulfill whatever expectation or criteria had been set, but the actual value of actual work. And very often in my life that's either been thinking or writing, but all kinds of work, really. And that is something that has become part of my identity. I work, and if I don't do that, I start to feel a bit strange. And likewise, I think with the podcast, if I didn't do a day, I would feel a bit weird. Now, the discipline to do it has become the kind of the gap in the way I feel about my day or myself if I'm not there. But for example, I'm actually recording this one on a Saturday, because I've got a birthday coming up on Monday. And on Monday, I don't know that I'll be able to make the time or want to make the time. I've got my new PlayStation 5 to play with. I don't think I'm necessarily going to get time to podcast. So in this case, the discipline is just thinking a little bit ahead. But I think this is a big deal. I think it is, maybe it's worth thinking about whether there is a way in which we can take the long-term changes that we want to make and build them more into part of our identity. And I think the key thing for me, if I think about the two that have worked, which, let's talk about this podcast, let's also talk about when I was 20 and I realised the value of work. In both those cases, there's not just a long-term goal like we were talking about. We were talking about on Sunday, I think it was. It's actually 2 podcasts ago. There's not just a long-term benefit, there's also a short-term benefit. That's definitely true of this podcast for me, and it's definitely true of work. I know that I'm on the march towards 1,000 podcasts, or however many it might end up being, just like the discipline to work, the desire to create and make stuff and put value out into the world, doesn't go away, or at least it hasn't gone away, even though I am now 51 and a day old. Anyway, maybe you're trying to make a big change. Maybe you're trying to influence other people or influence a team. I think the way to try and approach something that's big and hard is to make it part of your identity. Because discipline is work. Identity is just who we are. Thanks for listening, and remember, your story means business.